Alright, so Netflix dropped The Last House. I honestly don't know what I expected going into this. The basic idea immediately caught my attention. A family wakes up one day and suddenly can't leave their house. The doors won't open, the windows won't break, they can't get out their house. And something strange is happening outside the house. So naturally you're thinking this is going to be some post-apocalypse horror film, where we're slowly going to figure out what happened to the world. And for the first part of the movie I was really into it, because the mystery is really good. You don't know what is happening, you don't know why they're trapped, you don't know what is outside. I think this movie's biggest strength is that feeling of being trapped with these characters and having absolutely no idea what's going on. But unfortunately, I think The Last House loses that thing that made it interesting in the first place. So let's talk about it, and yes, there will be spoilers, so if you don't want to know, don't watch. The movie centers around Jason and Riley and their 2 kids. And right away, this movie puts the family in the worst situation imaginable. They're just living normal lives when suddenly this strange rain begins. Then they realize that something is very, very wrong. They can't leave. At first, they don't even understand the rules. They try the doors, they try the windows, they try everything that you would expect a normal person to try. And nothing works. That's where the movie really had me. Imagine being trapped in your own house and not knowing if you're going to be able to leave tomorrow. Or next week. Or ever. And the movie does a good job of making you think about the little things that would become a big problem. Food, water, medicine, electricity, mental health, and just having enough space to live with the same people every day. The movie starts giving us little hints about what's happening outside. There's a strange rain, and eventually they figure out that the rain isn't normal water. It's salt water. And then they start seeing these strange creatures. And this is where I started thinking, okay, what exactly are we dealing with here? Are these aliens? Are these monsters? Did something happen to the planet? Is this some kind of experiment? The movie keeps you guessing for a while, and I actually like that. I'm always a fan of a movie that doesn't explain everything immediately. Sometimes it's more interesting to sit there and be like, what the hell is going on? The Last House definitely knows how to create that mystery. The problem is, I think the movie takes a little too long getting somewhere with it. Because a huge portion of this movie is just watching a family live inside a house. And I understand why the movie does it. It's showing us the passage of time. It's showing us how they adapt. They're not just sitting around doing nothing. They create an indoor garden. They find ways to survive. They even use the chimney to try to catch things outside. And eventually the family has been trapped there for years. 5 years to be exact. And that's actually one of the more interesting ideas in the movie. Because imagine being trapped in the same house for 5 years. Your kids are growing up, and your life has been basically reduced to 4 walls. The outside world became something that you remember instead of something that you experience. That's terrifying. And I wish the movie had spent more time on the psychological side of things, because I think that's where The Last House is at its best. The relationship of Jason and Riley is pretty important also. Because obviously when you're trapped somewhere for years, you're going to start breaking down. These 2 have to constantly make decisions about how they're going to keep their family alive. And they don't always agree. Jason tends to be the one to take more risk. Riley is obviously worried about protecting the kids. And you can understand both sides. There's no perfect answer. If you stay inside forever, you're safe. But you're slowly losing your life. If you go outside, you might find freedom, or you might die. And that's a pretty good setup. The movie constantly gives you that feeling that eventually they're going to have to make a choice. Stay inside, or risk everything and go outside. And then we get the time jump, and this is where the movie really starts changing. 5 years has passed, the kids have grown up, the family has adapted to their strange new life, and at this point you're probably thinking the same thing I was. Okay, we have spent all this time building up the mystery, now we're finally going to figure out what's happening. And eventually we do get answers, kind of. The creatures outside aren't exactly what you might have expected. They're basically strange sea creatures that are connected to the flooded outside world, and the rain is essentially a part of this new environment. The movie gives you enough information to understand what is happening, but it doesn't explain everything, and that's probably going to annoy some people. Because after watching a movie for 2 hours, you probably want some big explanation. You want somebody to sit down and say, this is what happened, this is why you're trapped, this is where the creatures came from, this is why this is happening to your planet. But the movie doesn't really do that, and honestly, I'm okay with some of the mystery. But I think this movie needed a little more explanation than it gave us. Eventually one of the children gets sick, and suddenly the family has a serious problem. They need medicine and they don't have it. This forces Riley to take an enormous risk. She has to find a way to get outside and search for antibiotics. And this is one of the moments where the movie finally gives us the survival thriller I've been waiting for. Because now there's something actually at stake. We're not just trapped in a house. It's our kid could die if we don't do something. And that's much more interesting. The movie becomes tense again. You actually start to wonder if the people are going to make it or not. And then we get to the creatures. This is probably the biggest gamble the movie makes. Because for so much of the movie, these are just mysterious creatures lurking outside. You don't really know what they are. You barely see them. And when you finally get a better look at them, I don't know. For me, they weren't as scary as the movie wanted them to be. And that's a problem. Because the idea is terrifying. You're trapped in your house. The entire world has been flooded. And strange creatures are walking around outside. That sounds awesome. But once you actually see them, the mystery kind of disappears. And I think that's one of them situations where less might have been more. Sometimes the monster that you imagine in your head can be 10 times scarier than the filmmaker can put on screen. But then the movie actually does something I found pretty interesting. Instead of actually killing the creature, Jason starts to realize that maybe the creature isn't trying to hurt them. And this completely changes the way we look at the situation. Because what if the family has misunderstood the entire thing? Because what if the creature isn't some evil monster? What if it's just another thing trying to survive? And that brings us to the ending. Jason has an opportunity to kill the creature, and instead he chooses not to. He shows mercy. And the creature returns that mercy by opening the door and allowing the family to escape. And I have to admit, I wasn't expecting that. And I understand what the movie is basically trying to say here, that violence isn't always the answer. The family spends years thinking that the thing outside is their enemy. But once Jason realizes that the creature isn't attacking them out of pure evil, he changes his approach. And that act of mercy is what ends up saving them. It's actually a pretty nice message, but the execution is where I have a problem. Because after everything we've been through, after 5 years of isolation, after all the mystery, after all the build-up, the answer is basically, just don't kill the monster. And then the doors open, that's it. I wanted more, I wanted a bigger explanation. I wanted to understand why the creatures were there, I wanted to understand why the houses were sealed. I wanted to know what happened to the rest of the world. And the movie intentionally leaves a lot of that unanswered. And I think that's going to be the biggest dividing point for a lot of people. Some people are going to love the ending because it leaves things open for interpretation. A lot of people are going to feel completely ripped off. And honestly, I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't hate the ending. I actually kind of like the idea behind it. I just don't think the movie did enough to earn it. The first part of the movie makes you think you're going to get some huge explanation for what's happening. And instead, the movie turns into something much more about family, survival, and empathy. That's not necessarily bad. It's just different from what I thought I was getting. And I have to give credit to Wagner Moura here. I thought he was one of the strongest parts of the movie. Jason felt like an actual father. He's scared, he's frustrated, he's trying to keep everyone alive, and he's constantly trying to figure out what the right thing to do is. Greta Lee is also carrying a lot of the emotional weight of the movie, but I think Wagner Moura's performance stood out more for me. The movie really depends on these two actors because we're spending so much time with his family. There isn't some huge cast coming in and out, it's mostly them. So if you don't believe these people aren't actually a family, the whole movie falls apart. Luckily, I think performances keep it together. But here's my biggest problem with The Last House. It's too long. I don't think the basic idea needed nearly 2 hours. There are definitely scenes that I think could have been shortened. And because the movie is built around mystery, that can be dangerous. Mystery is great until the audience starts thinking, okay, but when are we actually going to get somewhere? And that's how I felt during parts of this movie. I wasn't necessarily bored. I was curious, but I was also waiting. Waiting for an explanation, waiting for the creatures, waiting for the family to get outside, waiting for the movie to give me something. And by the time we finally got there, I wasn't as invested as I was at the beginning. But I will say this, I think The Last House is a pretty interesting concept. A family trapped inside their house for years while the whole world outside changes. That's a great idea, and the movie has some genuinely creepy moments. The atmosphere works, the isolation works. The idea of watching your children grow up without ever leaving the house is disturbing. And the thought that the outside world might not even be recognizable anymore? That's terrifying. I just think the movie could have pushed those ideas much further. So overall, I think The Last House is one of those movies that I like the idea more than I did the actual movie. There's a really good movie buried in here. The premise is good, the cast is good, the atmosphere is good, and the first half does a really good job creating mystery. But then the movie starts dragging, and once the mystery gets explained, the explanation isn't quite satisfying enough. The creatures aren't as scary as they could have been, the ending's probably going to divide a lot of people, and I definitely wanted more answers. But it ain't a complete disaster either. There are some good ideas here, and I like that the movie tries to do something different, and not just give us another generic monster movie. For me, I'd give The Last House a 6 out of 10. Let me know how you guys feel about the ending, because I have a feeling that's going to be the part that everybody argues about. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.